Krishna Kshetra Swami Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Vishesha Shanyavari Paschatya Deshatarine Manchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhurayavascha Patitanam Avanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishnavanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasant Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayamudiraye
Tato Jayamudiraye
Nashta Prayeshu Avadreshu
Nashtaprayeshu Avadreshu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke
Bhaktir Bhagati Naishtiki
Bhakti Bhakti Naishtiki.
This morning, which is the morning of Rama Navami, the appearance day of Lord Rama, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 10, verse 11. 9, 10, 11. Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham
Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham
Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham
Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham
Vaideharaja duhitarya paya pitayam
Vaideharaja duhitarya paya pitayam
Vaideharaja duhitarya paya pitayam
Vaideharaja duhitarya paya pitayam
Bratra bane kripanavat priyaya viyukta
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 Stri sanginam gatimiti pratayam chachara
Sri Sanginam Gatimiti Pratyamashchachara
Stri sanginam gatimiti pratayam chachara
Sri Sanginam Gatimiti Pratyamashchachara
Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham.
Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham.
Vaideharaja dukhitaya payapitayam.
Vaideharaja dukhitaya payapitayam.
Bratravane kripanavat priyaya viyukta.
Bhatravane kripanavat priyaya viyukta.
Stri sanginam gatimiti pratayams chachara.
Sri sanginam gatimiti pratayams chachara.
Rakshodamena vrikivad vipine samaksham.
Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham.
Vaideharaja dukhitaya payapitayam.
Vaideharaja dukhitaya payapitayam.
Bhatravane kripanavat priyaya viyukta.
Bhatravane kripanavat priyaya viyukta.
Sri sanginam gatimiti pratayam chachara.
Sri sanginam gatimiti pratayam chachara.
Some younger devotees who want to try.
Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham.
Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham.
Vaideharaja dukhitrar apiyapitayam.
Vaideharaja dukhitaya payapitayam.
Bhatravane kripanavat priyaya viyukta.
Bhatravane kripanavat priyaya viyukta.
Stri sanginam gatim iti pratayam chachara.
Sri sanginam gatimiti pratayam chachara. Rakshodamena vrikavat vipine samaksham. Vaideharaja dukhitaya payapitayam. Bhatravane kripanavat priyaya viyukta. Sri sanginam gatimiti pratayam chachara. Okay, that was altogether 6 times. Prabhupada once said if we chant it 10 times, we can memorize it. You don't look very convinced.
No.
Actually, he said chant 10 times and then review it during the day. Who has time, right? Who has... Anyway, it's possible. All right. Raksha Adamena.
Raksha Adamena.
By the most wicked among Rakshasas.
By the most wicked among Rakshasas.
Who is that? Yes, Ravana. Vrikavat.
Vrikavat.
Like a tiger.
Like a tiger.
I always thought of Vrika as a wolf. Anyway. Vipine.
Vipine.
In the forest.
In the forest.
Asamaksham.
Asamaksham.
Unprotected.
Unprotected.
Vaideharaja duhitari.
Vaideharaja duhitari.
By this condition of Mother Sita,
By this condition of Mother Sita,
the daughter of the king of Videha,
the daughter of the king of Videha,
Apayapitayam,
Apayapitayam,
having been kidnapped,
having been kidnapped,
Bhratra,
Bradra,
with his brother.
with his brother,
Vane,
Vane,
in the forest.
in the forest,
Kripanavat,
Kripanavat,
as if a very distressed person.
as if a very distressed person.
Priyaya,
Priyaya,
by his dear wife.
by his dear wife,
Viyukta,
Viyukta,
separated.
separated,
Stri Sanginam,
Sri Sanginam,
of persons attracted to or connected with women.
of persons attracted to or connected with women.
Gatim,
Gatim,
destination.
destination,
Iti,
iti,
thus.
thus,
Pratayan,
Pratayam,
giving an example.
giving example,
Chachara,
Chachara,
wandered.
wandered.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation. When Ramachandra entered the forest and Lakshmana was also absent, the worst of the Rakshasas, Ravana, kidnapped Sita Devi, the daughter of the king of Videha, just as a tiger seizes unprotected sheep when the shepherd is absent. Then Lord Ramachandra wandered in the forest with his brother Lakshmana, as if very much distressed due to the separation from his wife. Thus, he showed by his personal example the condition of a person attached to women. Interesting. That's the Bhagavatam. One time Srila Prabhupada was asked, what is the essential lesson of the Ramayana? And he said, this is it. This teaches the situation of a person who is attached to women. That's what he said. Okay, purport. It's a rather long purport. Interesting points made. In this verse, the words Stri Sanginam Gatim Iti indicate that the condition of a person attached to women was shown by the Lord himself. According to moral instructions, Grihe Narim Vivarchayet, when one goes on a tour, when one travels, one should not bring his wife. But then Sita was insisting to go, wasn't it? And also she said, the duty of the wife is to always be with the husband. Conflicting dharmas. Formerly, men used to travel without conveyances, without a vehicle. But still, as far as possible, when one leaves home, one should not take his wife with him. Especially if one is in such a condition as Lord Ramachandra when banished by the order of his father. Whether in the forest or at home, if one is attached to women, this attachment is always troublesome. As shown by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his personal example. Of course, this is the material side of Stri Sangi, association with women. But the situation of Lord Ramachandra is spiritual. For he does not belong to the material world. Narayana Paro Vyaktat. Narayana is is beyond the material creation. Because he is the creator of the material world, he is not subject to the conditions of the material world. The separation of Lord Ramachandra from Sita is spiritually understood as Vipralamba, which is an activity of the Hladini potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, belonging to the Shringara Rasa, the mellow of conjugal love in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has all the dealings of love, displaying the symptoms called Sattvika, Sanchari, Vilapa, Murcha, and Unmada. Prabhupada does not translate these terms. Thus, when Lord Ramachandra was separated from Sita, all these spiritual symptoms were manifested. The Lord is neither impersonal nor impotent. Rather, he is Satchit Ananda Vigraha, the eternal form of knowledge and bliss. Thus, he has all the symptoms of spiritual bliss. Feeling separation from one's beloved is also an item of spiritual bliss. As explained by Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami, Radha Krishna Pranaya Vikritir Ladini Shaktini, the dealings of love between Radha and Krishna are displayed as the pleasure potency of the Lord. The Lord is the original source of all pleasure, the reservoir of all pleasure. Lord Ramachandra therefore manifested the truth both spiritually and materially. Materially, those who are attached to women suffer, but spiritually, when there are feelings of separation between the Lord and his pleasure potency, the spiritual bliss of the Lord increases. This is further explained in Bhagavad Gita 9:11. Avajananti manmudha manushim tanum ashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. One who does not know the spiritual potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead thinks of the Lord as an ordinary human being. But the Lord's mind, intelligence, and senses can never be affected by material conditions. This fact is further explained in the Skanda Purana as quoted by Madhvacharya. And we have several verses, 5 verses quoted by him. Nityapurna Sukha Jnana Sarupo Sal Yato Vibhu Atosya Rama Ityakya Tasya Dukkam Kuton Vapi Tatapi Lokasikshartam Adukko Dukkavartivat Antarhitam Lokadrishtya Sitam Asit Smaram Eva Gyapanardam Punarnitya Sambandha Svatmanasriya Ayodhyaya Vinirgachan Sarvalokasya Cheshvara Pratyaksham tu Shriyam Sardham Jagan Jagamanadir Abhyaya Nakshatramasa Ganitam Trayodasha Sahasrakam Brahmaloka Samam Chakre Samastam Kshitimandalam Ramo Ramo Rama Iti Sarvesham Abhavatada Sarvo Ramamayo Loko Yada Ramastvapālayat. And then Prabhupada does not translate those verses. He just says, it was actually, well, he's summarizing, he says, it was actually impossible for Ravana to take away Sita. The form of Sita, taken by Ravana, was an illusory representation of Mother Sita, Maya Sita. When Sita was tested in the fire, this Maya Sita was burned, and the real Sita came out of the fire. And last paragraph, a further understanding to be derived from this example is that a woman, however powerful she may be in the material world, must be given protection, for as soon as she is unprotected, she will be exploited by Rakshasas like Ravana. Ooh. Here the words Vaideharaja Duhitari indicate that before Mother Sita was married to Lord Ramachandra, she was protected by her father, Vaideharaja. And when she was married, she was protected by her husband. Therefore, the conclusion is that therefore the conclusion is that a woman should always be protected. According to the Vedic rule, there is no scope for a woman's being independent. Asamaksham, for a woman cannot protect herself independently. And so ends Prabhupada's purport. The verse again, when Ramachandra entered the forest and Lakshmana was also absent, the worst of the Rakshasas, Ravana, kidnapped Sita Devi, the daughter of the king of Videha, just as a tiger seizes unprotected sheep when the shepherd is absent. Then Lord Ramachandra wandered in the forest with his brother Lakshmana, as if very much distressed due to separation from his wife. Thus he showed by his personal example the condition of a person attached to women. As we've discussed, the Bhagavatam very much summarizes the pastimes of Ramachandra in this Canto 9. So what takes several chapters in the Valmiki Ramayana is in one verse in the Bhagavatam. This is where you can say the Ramayana story turns. And this is a major turning point in the Ramayana. Sita Devi is being taken away by this worst of demons, the Rakshasa. The Rakshasa Ravana has ignored the advice of his advisor, Maricha. And he will also ignore the advice of Sita. This is described in the Valmiki Ramayana. She tries to advise him and he won't listen. Jatayu also tries to advise him and he won't listen. It costs Jatayu his life. Ravana has a problem taking advice from others. Of course, this can be taken as a lesson for us. In this material world, we can easily be confused, bewildered, dragged by our minds, by our senses. But we have the good fortune of being able to hear good advice from others. That's especially for us in the association of Vaishnavas. We want to keep our ears open for good advice. Sadhu Shastra Guru Vakya, the words of the sadhus, of the Guru of Shastra. And of course this is also why we hear from Shastra, which is originating also from the source of all wisdom. And as we hear, Krishna explains in the Gita, we are strengthening our spiritual intelligence. It mentions in the verse, Kripanavat, that Rama is as if a very distressed person. The word Kripana can mean the opposite of a Brahmana. Srila Prabhupada sometimes explained. It can mean one who is selfish as opposed to one who is giving, who is broad-minded. In the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is very distressed at the situation before him of the prospect of fighting in this battle, he gives himself to Krishna with the words Karpanya dosho apahata sabhava prichami tang dharma samuta cheta yatreyasya nishchitam bruhi tang me shishyasteham shadhimam tvang prabandhan. Karpanya is a version and related to the word kripana. Karpanya dosha, he says, I am suffering from the fault of being a kripana, of having the mood, the feelings of the kripana. And therefore I'm asking you for direction, for advice. Prichami, so please help. Here the Supreme Lord himself is suffering from Karpanya dosha. Or is he? The word is kripanavat, as if. The vat suffix suggests as if he is in this situation. In the purport, of course, Prabhupada is clarifying this by pointing out that the Lord is teaching lessons, and he is teaching lessons on both sides of the boundary, if you like, of matter and spirit. So on the material side, he's giving some direct or less than direct instruction about behavior, social behavior, and on the spiritual side he is demonstrating the rasa of Sringara in separation, and in this way he's actually showing the highest rasa. That which is the highest in the spiritual world is the lowest in the material world. It's a reflection going on. On the material side, there's this point about attachment, and of course it goes either way. It's attachment of man for woman, it's attachment of woman for man, which is a trouble for both. It's the trouble, you can say it's the trouble in material existence. So there's a symmetry there, but there seems to be also an asymmetry here, because the emphasis is on the need for women rather than men, women to be protected, that they can never be in a situation of being not protected, because it is the nature of this world that especially men tend to be uncontrolled. Men are dangerous. And so women need protection from other men, from their own men, to be protected from others. Sita was married to Rama already, according to the best of my calculations, when she was 6 years old. Because it's mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana that they were together in Ayodhya for 12 years before Rama was banished to the forest, at which time she was 18 years old. Now, of course, in modern society, the idea of child marriage is considered very horrible. And it's difficult for us to imagine how it might work. Gandhi was married, Mahatma Gandhi was married when he was 13 years old, and his wife was also 13 years old. Many years later, he mentions that he felt this was a mistake, that it was not right, it was not good either for her or for him. Usually the idea, as I understand, is yes, there will be marriage in the sense that commitment will be there from a young age, but actual marriage will take place several years later. And here I think there is a certain logic that the very young and even younger, the very young husband and the even younger wife will understand from a very early age, I belong to this person. And this can be a source of, or a basis for a lot of peacefulness, which we find missing in contemporary society, where young people, at least by the time they are teenagers, are on the hunt. Everyone is looking for a mate, and this is keeping everyone quite disturbed. Social life goes on this basis. But if the arrangement is made early in life, this is your husband, this is your wife, okay, that's just how it's going to be, and then there's no room for speculation. Well, okay, that's maybe one problem solved. There may be other problems created as a result, but that goes into the whole subject of the problem of male-female relations, which is, of course, what renunciation is all about. It's about saying, well, there's really no solution to all of this, so let's remove ourselves, let's step back from this kind of situation. The situation of Rama in the forest is, as we read yesterday, interesting. Shurpanakha was confused. How is this? You are in the forest like a renunciant, and yet you are with your wife. So even she, as terrible a person she was, she saw there's some incongruity here. And Prabhupada quotes this statement, Grihe Narim Vivarjayet. that, vivarjayet, one should give up narim, the wife, grihe, literally it just says in the house, but apparently the context, which we don't have here, is saying when one travels. But then again, everyone is traveling all the time. We are all in these bodies, traveling. We are all moving. The body, that is to say, the body is moving. Actually, Gita says the soul does not move, but the bodies are always moving at every moment. And so, of course, the whole process of yoga, particularly bhakti yoga, is to work toward detachment. Detachment especially from the opposite sex. Well, this was not part of Ravana's program. Ravana, poor Ravana, he was not getting a good spiritual education. Although Ravana is known for having been a very qualified Brahmana. Yeah. He was a Brahmana? Not a Kshatriya? No, he was considered a Brahmana. A Brahma Rakshasa. The worst kind. These are the most dangerous. And so, having become attracted to Sita, who is not only not his wife, but is the wife of Rama, not only the wife of Rama, but the eternal consort of Rama. Not only that, but the Shakti of Rama, the Shakti of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In his foolishness, he schemes to kidnap or to abduct her. And he is apparently, but only apparently, successful. As we read, we heard before, the Kurma Purana says, and apparently also the Skanda Purana says, he didn't actually capture Sita at all. Rather, he simply captured a semblance of Sita, Maya Sita. Well, shall we read a bit of this episode when he approaches Sita in the forest, Ravana? Shall we read this? Yes, please. Yes? No? No. It's too sad to hear. We don't want to hear these sad things. Okay. Oh, this must be earlier. Yes. Okay. Right, so she has sent Lakshmana away. By the way, this story of Lakshmana first drawing a magical ring around Sita, this is from later versions of Ramayana. We don't find it in the Valmiki Ramayana. Apparently it's not in any of the manuscripts of the Valmiki Ramayana. So she is all alone now. And then comes this apparently ascetic. He is dressed as an ascetic. So we have two cases of disguise. We had the disguise of Maricha, which drew Rama away, and now we have Ravana also in disguise. So there's a lot of arrangements being made to trick both Rama and Sita. So reading from Aranyakanda, this is Sarga 44, toward the end. When Maitili observed that he, Ravana, had come in the garb, the dress of a twice-born, a Brahmana, with a begging bowl and saffron robe, when she saw these paraphernalia, it was impossible to refuse him, and so she extended him an invitation befitting a Brahmana. She says, "Here is a cushion, O Brahman. Please be seated and accept this water for your feet. Here I have made ready for you the best fare, the best food of the forest, the best that the forest can offer. You may partake of it, you can eat it freely." So Maitili extended him a cordial invitation, and as Ravana gazed at her, he gazed at her, the wife of the Lord of men. He confirmed his resolve to take her by force, and with that consigned himself to death. That means he resolved, in effect, that he would die. Her husband, Rama, had, of course, gone to hunt the magic deer, and she waited for him and Lakshman, scanning the horizon, looking for them. But she saw neither Rama nor Lakshmana, only the deep green forest. So Ravana sits down, and then he begins to question her. And she says, "I'm the daughter of Janaka, the great king of Mithila. My name is Sita. And I'm the wife of Rama." And so on. She goes on to tell their whole story about why they're in the forest. So she's being really very friendly. And she's doing this, it's explained, because she's also concerned. He's a Brahmin, and Brahmins, they can give blessing, but also they can curse. So she wants to make sure she pleases him. She doesn't want to be cursed. Okay. Oh yeah, here is where it says, "Rama, my mighty husband, was then 25 years old when they were sent to the forest, and I had just passed my 18th birthday." And just before this, she says, we had been 12 years together. So apparently she was 6 years old when they were married. And Rama would have been, how old? 13. Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because we understand he was 16 when he went with Vishwamitra, wasn't it? I think so. It was Vishwamitra, and then after killing the demons for Vishwamitra, they go to meet and marry Sita. So something may be a little inconsistent there. So there's some discussion goes on like this, and then Ravana begins to speak. And he's quite honest. He says, "I am he who terrifies the worlds with all their gods, asuras, and great serpents. I am Ravana, O Sita, supreme lord of the hosts of Rakshasas. Now that I have set eyes on you, flawless golden lady dressed in silk, I shall no longer take any pleasure in my own wives. And he has many wives. I don't remember. He has lots of wives. And then he advertises his own abode. He says, in the middle of the ocean lies my vast city, Lanka, on top of a mountain peak and ringed by the sea. There, my radiant Sita, you shall stroll, you shall walk with me through the forests, never longing for this life you are leading in the wilderness. 5,000 slave women, all adorned with ornaments, shall wait upon you hand and foot if you become my wife. So Ravana spoke, but Janaka's daughter, that faultless beauty, angrily and with utter contempt for the Rakshasa, replied, I am faithful to Rama, my husband, the equal of great Indra, unshakable as a great mountain, unperturbable as the great sea. I am faithful to Rama, the great-armed, great-chested prince, who moves with the boldness of a lion-like man, a lion among men. I am faithful to Rama, the king's most cherished son, a great-armed, mighty prince of wide renown and strict self-control, whose face is like the moon. So that should be clear, but it doesn't seem to be clear to Ravana. To Ravana then she says, as for you, you are a jackal in the presence of a lioness, to come here seeking me whom you can never have. You could no more touch me than touch the radiant sun. Now this point is taken by commentators to be the hint of Valmiki Ramayana that, in fact, Ravana does not capture Sita, but rather captures only the Maya Sita. Later on, when Maya Sita, we have to assume, is captured in Lanka, and Ravana is trying to persuade her to yield to him. He gives her 1 year to consider. And while she has 1 year of time in the Ashoka garden, these women, Rakshasis, surround her, and their duty is to break her will, to break her down, so that she will finally yield to him. But of course, Sita has absolutely no such intention. It's difficult for her. At one point, Ravana comes to try to do some more persuasion. Part of his persuasion, he threatens her that if she does not yield to him after 1 year, he will have her chopped up in small pieces and cooked for dinner. Nice, huh? He has a real mood of loving. Yes? You love me, and if you don't, I will eat you. And Sita, at one point, says, I would have burned you to ashes, but I have restrained myself. Why? Because, number one, I do not have the permission of my husband to burn you to ashes. And number two, I do not want to diminish the power of my austerity. I am faithful to my husband, and that faithfulness, this is a very common understanding that the wife's faithfulness to the husband makes her very powerful. So even though she might do this burning as her faithfulness, still to do such an act as this has the effect of diminishing the Shakti of austerity. So she says, I don't want to waste my powers of austerity on you. You're not worth it. So she says like that. Sita, of course, is the paragon. She is the example of faithfulness of the wife for the husband. And also she is the example of the bhakta in nishta, in fixed devotion to the Lord. This is explained. Oh, it's already late. Anyway, we don't have breakfast today, right? Okay, a little longer. This is explained in the Rahasya Trayasara, which is a work, Sanskrit work by Vedanta Deshika. Vedanta Deshika is one of the great acharyas of the Sri Sampradaya, followers of Ramanujacharya. He wrote a very elaborated elaboration on the principle of prapatti, or sharanagati. What is sharanagati? Surrender, yes. And he wrote an entire book on this subject of surrender to the Lord. There are 6 aspects of surrender. You probably are familiar. Anukulyasya sankalpa, accepting what is favorable. Pratikulyasya varjanam, rejecting what is not favorable. What's next? Anyone know? Rakshishya titi vishvasa. This one is, yes, specifically protector. Rakshishyati iti vishvasa, having the faith, vishvasa, that Rakshishyati, the Lord will protect me. And then Bhoktritve varanam, this is having the conviction the Lord will maintain me. Atmanikshepa garpanye shadvidha sharanagati. So Atmanikshepa, giving oneself to the Lord, and karpanya. Here, the word karpanya means humility. Karpanya dosha, it was a fault before, and now it's an ornament, it's a qualification. So Sanskrit's like that. Anyway, the point is Rakshishati iti vishvasa, this conviction the Lord will protect me. This is explained by Vedanta Deshika. He raises the question at one point, how do I know that I am fixed, nishta, in prapanna, in surrender, prapanna or sharanagati? How do I know? What are the characteristics? And he divides these into 3 subcategories. Gets a little technical. He says there's swarupa nishta, there's upaya nishta, and there's purushartha nishta. So swarupa, this is in you can say in Gaudiya Vaishnava language, this would be sambandha. So knowing what is our actual identity, our spiritual identity. And the example given here is if someone speaks sharp words to you, it can be very disturbing, of course. But the Swarupa Nishta devotee is not disturbed. Why? Because the devotee knows, I'm not this body, and whatever criticism is being made, it is only of the body. This is speaking of an unjust criticism. And then upaya. Upaya means the means, the process of surrendering, or the process of serving. And here Sita is example because of her confidence in the Lord, and the example is given that while they're in the forest before this occasion happens, Sita is completely, actually I'm mixing up the examples I think, but she is completely fearless. Why? Because she is with her Lord, with Rama. And she, even when wild elephants, lions, tigers are coming, she is not disturbed. She is completely peaceful. And then Purushartha, in this case, Purushartha means knowing the aim of human life, which is surrender. So being clear that the aim of life is surrender to the Lord, to the Supreme Lord. This is what's understood. So if one is clear about this, then that is a case of nishta in surrender. So this is the situation of Sita. She is completely without doubt about her determination to be faithful to Rama. Then, well, the situation gets worse. Ravana has come in a chariot which flies through the air and is drawn by mules. You know what a mule is? What's a mule in Slovenian? Mula.
Between the horse and the ass.
Huh?
Between the horse and the donkey.
Yeah, it's a half, yeah. So mule. So he's coming in this sort of vehicle, and yes, of course, Ravana does grab Sita, or the Maya Sita really, and takes with him. But that's when Jatayu comes, and Jatayu is this giant vulture. And he's a vulture who speaks. Apparently he speaks very good Sanskrit. And initially he tries to persuade Ravana to desist. This is completely madness to steal away Sita, because this is only going to be your destruction, and so on. And of course Ravana doesn't listen, so that's when Jatayu attacks. So that he's flying, it's in the air, all of this is going on. And it says here that Jatayu succeeds in destroying, killing the mules and destroying this chariot. So they're on the ground, and on the ground the fight continues, and that's when Jatayu loses his wings and also his feet, and that's the end. That's when he gives up his life. Later, of course, Rama will come. He will see Jatayu. Jatayu is not, he hasn't lost consciousness yet, so in the last moments he speaks to Rama. And then Rama gives him an honorary burial as a soldier. So he honors, although vulture is, a very generally a nasty sort of bird, but here Jatayu is a hero. Well, it seems that Ravana then continues with Sita flying through the air, but it doesn't ever explain exactly how this happens. But apparently he can fly also by himself. He's got lots of mystic powers. All of this is going to bring about great distress for Rama. Kripanavat, it seems that he is very distressed. And that distress is going to lead him to resolve. Initially, he wants to destroy the entire universe. He's so angry. He says, this is Sarga 60, he says, "Watch now, Lakshman, as I fill the sky with missiles, with arrows and darts, leaving no space whatever for creatures that move about the three worlds. I will bring the host of planets to a standstill. I will darken the moon that brings the night. I will paralyze fire and wind. I will block out the light of the sun. I will grind the mountain peaks to dust. I will dry up every body of water. I will uproot every tree and every vine and every shrub, and I will annihilate the ocean." What do you think? Is Rama angry? Maybe, or does he only appear angry? Well, after going on and on like this for some time, now Lakshman wants to dissuade him. So there's persuasion and there's dissuasion. To stop someone from doing something, dissuade. So Lakshman wants to cool him down. Sometimes it's Lakshman who gets really angry and Rama has to cool him down. Sometimes it's Lakshman cooling down Rama. He says in Sarga 62, "King Dasharatha brought about your birth only by performing great mortifications, great austerities, and a great sacrificial ritual, like the immortal gods obtaining the drink of immortality. Your virtues had so won his heart." We lost our translator. Are you back? It's a tough job. Your virtues had so won his heart, Dasharatha's heart, that when he was separated from you, the king and lord of the earth became a god, as we heard from Bharata. I think this is saying Dasharatha, when he left the world, he became a divinity. If you do not endure the sorrow that has befallen you, if you can't tolerate this sadness, O Kakutsta, remember that's a name of Rama, one whose hair is like a crow's nest. What other person, lesser and weaker as he must be, will ever endure? So here he's saying, you are the Lord, you have to give example for the world. Now if you're going to be like this, all upset about everything, then how is anybody else going to tolerate their suffering? This is the way of the world. Yayati, the son of Nahusha, won the right to live in Indra's heaven, and then misfortune touched him. So now he's going to say, look, this is the world. There's misfortune. This is what happens. Or consider the great Rishi Vasishta, our father's family priest. 100 sons were born to him in a single day, but all of them were later killed. I'm not familiar with that story. and the mother of the world, the goddess to whom all people pay homage, they offer respects, the earth herself, as we see, my truthful brother, is sometimes shaken. Okay, so the mother of the world, I guess it's referring to Bhumi, the earth. Sometimes she is shaking, and there's earthquake. And like this, he goes on telling how terrible things happen in this world. So, what do we have to tolerate? He's giving the same instruction Krishna gives to Arjuna in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. Mantras parshas tu kaunteya. So he says, whether Vaidehi is simply lost or she's been carried away, you must not grieve like a lesser man. Men like you do not grieve, O Rama, for they always see things as they truly are. However great their difficulties, their sight remains unclouded. This is a nice lesson for us. To not be disturbed is to see things as they are. And in one purport in chapter 14, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, a person who is fixed in the mode of goodness sees things as they are, sees things in their right position. Yeah, so like this, he cools down Lord Rama and says, look, let's just go and look for Sita, shall we? So that's what they're going to do. Okay, I think I'll end there. Any comments or questions? Yes.
In the commentary to the verse, it is said that Lord Ramachandra exhibits both, wants to pass some spiritual and material lessons. And then he shows both. And yesterday you spoke about Mother Sita almost, or I mean we didn't speak about it, but she utters this terrible accusation or to Lakshman, and she is obviously pursuing or provoking. Right behind the corner there is a catastrophe, and it looks like this could develop into some Greek tragedy if she pursues that course of action. And can we say that she is exhibiting some utter lust, and by doing this, and what can we learn from all this? Because I'm quite bewildered who she is. Because on the other hand, she can be, she could be in some Greek tragedy provoking this big catastrophe, and on the other hand, she's an example of this faithful wife.
Yeah.
And it is really.
Well, okay. This, I would just say generally, this is part of the richness of the epics. But epics means Ramayana is one of the two Sanskrit epics of ancient India. There's the Ramayana, there's the Mahabharata, and both of them have, you can say, survived and thrived throughout so many centuries. One reason being because there's so many different sides to what happens, and also there's some complexity in the characters, in the persons. And as I see it, that's one of the reasons why it's such a glorious, why it remains popular. Because you can look at it this way, you can look at it that way, how to understand. So yes, with Sita, in this case, you can say she's in this state of utter panic, because in her mind she understands one point, and that is her husband's in danger. So from the perspective of this point she's making, I am faithful to my husband alone. This makes complete sense. Her dedication to her husband is utter and complete single-mindedness. And in that single-mindedness, there can be all manner of irrationality. She starts to then become suspicious of Lakshmana. But that irrationality is a result of her good quality, her faithfulness. So in that way she is seen as, she remains glorious for that reason. And her irrationality, well, we can say it's necessary to get Lakshman out of the picture, because otherwise Ravana is not going to be able to abduct her. But you mentioned Greek tragedy, which might remind us the great wars of history, including the Trojan War, have been over a woman. The Ramayana is a war over Sita. The Mahabharata is a war over Draupadi. And the Trojan War is a war over Helena. Yeah. Interesting. What to make of this? Is there some lesson here? Yes, Maya.
For an inspiring lecture. I would like to know regarding this material needs to be protected, that they're not protected. How can devotees like this, how can they be protected if they are not protected?
Yeah, good question, good point. A few things can be said. The general principle for all of us, male, female, married, not married, have been married in the past, will never marry, brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi. We all understand that our only real shelter is Krishna. That is, a defining qualification of a devotee. Rakshishyati vishvasa. I am actually protected only by the Lord. How the Lord protects us may be in various ways. But of course also ultimately we understand that our material bodies, our material conditions are, let us say, peripheral to our real identity. We often put it in, as Prabhupada would often say, we are not the body. But we might want to say that the body is peripheral to us. We are in these bodies and they are very important to us in so many ways. But we understand they are peripheral to ourself, and with that understanding we can be determined to take shelter of Krishna in all circumstances. That said, then, for ladies, the general practice is that they are married sooner or later. As I was saying before, traditionally it would be sooner rather than later. Circumstances being what they are, and individual circumstances of individual ladies. One may not be married either earlier or even later. Whether by choice or not can also be a question. But some sort of understanding is there within our society that we as a society have a duty, collective duty, to protect the ladies who are not married. And this is one of the functions, we can say, of our temples, although this is actually an unusual adjustment that Srila Prabhupada made in India. Traditionally, temples and mattas or ashramas are not places of unmarried ladies. This was something that Prabhupada introduced, and he introduced it only because there was one lady, one young lady, who was following Srila Prabhupada, and she insisted. She insisted, I want to also be a devotee, I want to live with the devotees. And she was so determined that Prabhupada said, okay. That was how it all started. So, that said, I would also suggest that still the general material standard principle is that ladies are married. Prabhupada joked once, he said, we want to have all the ladies married and we want all the men to remain brahmachari. It's
the last word you said?
Brahmachari.
What does that mean?
It means a celibate monk.
It's interesting because that was if you're through, that was actually my next question, because this seems to be a contradiction, because...
You notice, that was the joke. That was the joke.
Yeah, because all the guys that I talk to here seem to be celebrating, what appears to me to be a march into Catholicism priesthood. And then, basically, it's like, oh, I gave up women, I gave up, the worldly things, and then on the other hand, you just said that the women here should be married, so I'm wondering, who should they be married to?
You've exactly identified the question. And to this, I do not have an answer. But what we do see is that in course of time, many of those who are celibate monks, because this is a part of the tradition, brahmachari is not one who has taken a lifetime vow. A brahmachari is one who is celibate, but is allowed to marry if he chooses in course of time. Unlike the sannyasi who makes a vow of celibacy for life. So, and we see that brahmacharis after some time, it's not unusual that they take a wife, and that is quite respectable. It's part of our system, you could say. But I would say that also, I think an interesting regulation we could introduce, just occurred to me, it would be an interesting, is that if a brahmachari decides to marry, he has to first go out and preach and inspire at least one man to come and join the ashram as a brahmachari. That would be good, huh? What do you think, Bharata Prabhu?
Yes, for the future generation.
Oh, I see. That's another way of making brahmacharis. That takes time, though. Anyway, we won't. If I speak much longer, I might get myself in trouble here, one way or another. But yeah, this is the challenge. But as I mentioned yesterday in another context, where there is a will, there is a way. So if a lady has this determination, yes, I will be peaceful when and if I am properly married to a responsible Vaishnava, so there will be a way.
But if God is, and again, I haven't really been here for very long, but if I'm understanding a lot of what I've been reading, it's if God is to, and I don't know even whether this is something that's agreed to by Hare Krishna, if God is a composite of masculine and feminine energies, and we are all a reflection of God, basically, and we are always in God, then why would it necessarily be, even derogatory or even frowned upon in any way if a man were to take a wife or otherwise? I mean, why should there even be necessarily, I'm just asking, a position at all that one would be celibate or not celibate, or where does this, how does this tie in? Because this is a real contradiction even now that I'm hearing. It seems I'm having a difficult time reckoning.
It's not frowned upon for a male devotee to marry. That said, in the sort of earlier decades of our society in the West, ISKCON, it was very much frowned upon. It was considered a real no-no. And if a brahmachari decided to marry, they were considered fallen. They were considered, oh, that person's kind of no longer properly situated. I think we've matured a bit over the years, and we don't make such, I hope, we don't make such judgments. But as far as contradiction goes, one might say many things. The general principle with the ashram system, it's understood, it's explained many times by Srila Prabhupada, is that these are support systems for working toward pure devotion, toward complete liberation from material life. And it can function in different ways. There can be a progression. In fact, it's the usual process that one is a brahmachari, celibates, often said student, not monk so much as student. And then it's natural that one sort of graduates and then marries. And then, after having a family, one is older, one retires, that's called vanaprastha. And then finally, with the wife taken care of by her grown sons, the husband leaves home and permanently he's now a wandering monk. That's the idea. Okay, I guess we'll... Oh, yes. So, you got worried about Ravana being a Brahmin.
No. I was wondering where to read Sita, because like when Brahmas told coward boys, I heard on some lecture, there were real coward boys. They were somewhere in the forest playing for 1 year.
They were in a cave, I think. Yeah, asleep in a cave. But where was Sita? I don't know if that's mentioned anywhere. She was avyakta. Right, so have a wonderful day today. We're celebrating the appearance of Sri Rama. So let us remember Ram, 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 as we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare. And then later this afternoon, coming together to celebrate. I understand 5 o'clock? Okay. Yes, and it's a great day for feasting on the holy name rather than eating, taking prasadam until later this evening. So, yes, as Prabhupada would say, chant and be happy. Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki Shri Shri Panchatattva ki Srila Prabhupada ki